Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the September 27th, 2022 Longmont City Council regular session to order. Can I have the roll call, please, Don?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Doggle-Faring.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Waters. Here. And Councilmember Yarborough. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We haven't heard from Councilor Yarborough. I think she'll probably be here in a few minutes. Can we stand for the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder to the public, this meeting is being live streamed. You can view it at www.longmontcolorado.gov. You can also view... Oh, I will wait for our Councilor Yarborough. Don, will you show the record that Councilor Yarborough is present?
Absolutely, Mayor.
Thank you. So you can view this at the live stream at www.longmontcolorado.gov and also at LPM, longmontpublicmedia.com. It's also on Comcast Channel 8 and 880. Anyone wishing to speak at first call at public invited to be heard, you need to add your name, his or her name, to the list outside the council chambers, and only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. However, speakers who do not place their names on the list will still have the opportunity to speak during the public hearing items this evening, or at the very final call public invited to be heard at any item at the end of the meeting. May I have a motion to approve minutes? Thank you. These are the September 13th, 2022 minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Do we have any agenda revisions or submissions of documents and motions to direct the city manager to add items to a future agenda. Anybody on council? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, last week at the end of the meeting, I mentioned that we needed to return to Vision Zero. And I was told by the staff that they were on it and I didn't need to make this motion today. But there has been such an outpouring of interest and concern on traffic safety that I'm going to make it in a modified form anyway. The staff has expressed its intention to bring back a study session report on Vision Zero, and I assume recommendations on how the city might begin down the road to compliance. What I would like to move is that next week or the following week at the latest, we have a target date for that presentation. So you guys get to figure out how long it's going to take. We need to know so that we can talk to people and tell them how fast progress is going to be made.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Do we have any discussion? I do know that Vision Zero has been being worked on at Dr. Cog constantly, and I also know that Phil Greenwald has been working on it, and it could be coming back to us in the master plan, which is coming to council shortly before the end of the year. So I don't know that I'll vote for this because holding them to a target date, because I think that Phil is trying to work along the dates that coincide with Dr. Cog and the state on Vision Zero. Does everybody know what Vision Zero is? It is a plan to reduce the number of highway deaths that are triggered by accidents. Pardon me?
It's not just highway.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vehicular deaths. Are there any other comments? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I am gonna vote for this. I understand you guys have lots on your plate, but I'm with Council Member Martin in terms of trying to respond to questions. We had lots of very thoughtful input a week ago. We've had a fair amount of correspondence sent, all of it equally thoughtful. Nobody trying to push for things that aren't reasonable, but there's a clear concern. I think it's well placed, and I would prefer not to be in a position to say, yeah, well, we're going to do this, but I can't tell you when. I can't tell you where it falls in terms of other priorities, how urgent the staff feels it to be. So having a date or a time frame would be really, really helpful to not leave that to chance.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I don't think that there was anything in my motion that would imply that the staff cannot take into account the progress of our partner agencies.
Okay.
So if they have a timeline, we can align with that. I don't have a problem with that. I would like to know that that's what we're doing.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, let's vote.
So, Mayor,
Yes,
if
sir.
I can clarify, the motion was no later than 2 weeks, we bring you a date as to when we can present. Okay.
Can you do that? Does that align with what
Yeah,
we're
we're
doing?
just getting a date, so we'll get with Phil in terms of what he's working, and he will identify the date, and we will let you all know what we're scheduling is the way I understand it.
Okay. And thank you for your comments, councilors. I will vote for this as well. And that carries, and that motion carried. Thank you. I do have a motion as well, and it is a clarification, actually, on a motion that I made last week after we had the presentation by Commissioner Marta Lochmin. It was on the Boulder County taxes 1A and 2A, 2B, 1A and 2B. No, 1A and 1B. You'd think I'd know the alphabet by now. And I was remiss in not including in that resolution 1C, which is the transportation tax as well. I remember that we had supported that verbally, but we did not say anything about a resolution. So I moved to direct staff. You haven't made the resolution yet, have you? No, great. I moved to direct staff to include in our resolution to support the Boulder County taxes 1A, 2A, and 1C. 1A, 2B, and 1C.
One more time. 1A, 1B, 1C.
1A, 1B, 1C. ABC. So that was my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Let's vote. I don't see anybody in the queue. That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mayor, if I might, there is one agenda revision.
Yes.
At council's desk is a replacement for item 9D. The proposition 108 should be proposition 123, so there is a substitute, just correcting that number at your
Okay.
desks.
Yep, I see it here. So do we need a motion correcting that proposition number from 108? Councilor Martin?
Yes, I have the motion ready. I thought we would do it by pulling it off the consent agenda, however.
Okay. I'll call on you then. Thank you.
Okay.
So, City Manager, do you have a report for us tonight?
No report, Mayor, Council. Sorry, the other one was dying on me.
Thank you. We don't have any special reports and presentations, so this is public, first call public invited to be heard. I do have a statement to make actually before we start this, and if anybody is here to speak upon what was said in next door, that there's kind of a meme going around that the councilors have given themselves a $20,000 raise every year. So that is not true. So if you've come here to question us on that, I am telling you, we're not giving ourselves a raise at all. So I would like one, but that isn't going to happen. So Nadine Lester is the first person. You have 3 minutes, and please state your name and address.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. I'm Nadine Lester, 1517 Mayfield Lane. I'm here to speak about 2 items that are coming to your attention tonight: our city's zero waste resolution and the city budget. First, I hope you will support version B, alternative 2 of the zero waste resolution. I believe the goals are realistic. Yes, I think we can divert 75% of Longmont's waste by 2030, and I think we can achieve 95% waste diversion by 2050. At the Latino Chamber of Commerce event, where I volunteered for Sustainable Resilient Longmont's Zero Waste team on Saturday, I helped folks sort their trash into recycling and composting bins. I saw firsthand how younger members of our community are very much accustomed to recycling and composting their trash. Sorting the stuff is part of the day's routine at many schools and workplaces. I mention this because while you may hear from a few folks that zero waste and composting facilities are problematic or some kind of weird imposition, a lot of young and busy people who don't often contact their city council think it's very normal. The need for zero waste is obvious to them. Please encourage their efforts and move our community forward by approving version B, alternative 2 of the Longmont Zero Waste Resolution. Next, I'd like to ask you to remember our town's natural resources needs when you consider next year's budget. I think the Rogers Grove Bank Swallows debate illustrates how there's always a bigger picture when we make development plans, no matter how worthy our goals may be. What's the impact of any development going to be on the wildlife, the plants, as well as the human population of Longmont? The fact is, we share our earthly home with many other living things, and we need to manage our open space and natural areas with expertise. Our population has grown, and our city's natural resources team has not. When it comes to taxpayer funding, our citizens have indicated many times and clearly that our wildlife habitats, natural areas, trails, parks, and open spaces deserve as much consideration as any other quality of life amenity in town. Thank you all for everything you do for our town, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, Nadine. Next up is Jamie Simo. Simo.
Jamie Simo, 517 Independence Drive. In 2018, Longmont finalized its Open Space Master Plan, OSMP, which was an update of the 2002 OSMP. In that document, the city acknowledged the increased demands put on Longmont's open space program, including increased visitation to open space areas and a greater number of tasks needing to be addressed by staff. This was even before the COVID shutdown, which saw an unprecedented number of visitors to Longmont's parks and open spaces. While Longmont has done a good job acquiring properties for its open space program, even the OSMP recognizes that eventually the focus of the open space program must transition from acquisition to management of existing areas. Unfortunately, we are already seeing a tipping point with regard to maintenance. As you heard last week, there are a large number of trees planted at Dickens Farm Nature Area that are now dead or dying due to lack of attention. I conduct monthly bird surveys for the city, and on this past Sunday's survey at Rogers Grove, I counted no fewer than 6 off-leash dogs, despite the fact that this is not a dog park, and there is signage that dogs must be on leash. I also frequently see bags of dog poop left along the trail instead of thrown in any of the trash bins that line the path. I have never seen a ranger there to educate visitors and enforce these or other rules. Natural Resources requested 6 additional full-time employee positions in the new budget. However, none of these positions were recommended to go forward. I will reiterate the question raised last week. Is there a rubric to determine what positions advance for consideration? Who makes the decision on which positions move forward and which don't? In November of 2000, Longmont voters approved a 0.2% increase in the city sales tax to fund the acquisition, development, and maintenance of land for open space. This open space sales tax was extended in 2007, and unless it is extended again, is set to sunset in 2034. Additional funding for the open space program is supposed to come from the royalties from oil and gas exploration on open space properties. Page 9 of the OSMP states that all royalties from open space properties should be deposited into the open space fund account. Royalties from oil and gas extraction on open space partially go to fund inspection of wells and monitoring of air and water surrounding wells, as well as other related activities. However, any funds not used for those activities must be dedicated solely to funding staff, buying properties, and most importantly, especially if the open space tax is not renewed, maintaining Longmont's open space properties. What I want to know is, are there oil and gas royalties from open space properties being used outside of the open space program? In addition to oil and gas exploration, gravel mining may also occur on Longmont open space. However, there is nothing in the city code or OSMP that talks about royalties from that activity. Any royalties from mining on open space properties must also go into the open space fund and used solely for the open space program. Longmont's open space program is an invaluable asset to our community, as shown during the COVID lockdown, and it is vitally important that all possible resources are used to fund it in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. David Droge.
Hi there. I'm Dave Droge. I live at 4217 Florentine. I'm here tonight to talk about the Unreasonable Noise Ordinance 02022-31. I feel that it is insufficient, and I'd like to just quickly read it. Just take a second. Motor vehicle noise from a licensed non-commercial motor vehicle audible 300 feet from the source of the sound. Motor vehicle noise means noise from engines, exhaust systems, and brakes. Our house, we live off of Clover Basin. Our porch is 100 feet from Clover Basin. And I'd say probably 99% of the cars go by there's no problem. It's the 1% that's the problem. And when those cars go by, I can't hear my wife speaking to me. And that's 100 feet. And I would guess, I think that, so we have an outlot beside us, and I don't know that that's probably very common. I'd expect that most homes in Longmont are closer than 100 feet. And certainly closer than 300 feet. So the folks that are hearing these noises are nowhere near this 300-foot audible, inaudible threshold. Now, I can understand why we might want to use this audible, inaudible threshold, because otherwise we have to measure it. And I'd like the city council to think maybe a little bit more about measuring it. Now, I heard something about sound cameras possibly being used, and I think that's a terrific idea, and I'd like to put my name in to have one put on our street if we do get that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of apps available. This one happens to be free. I looked at 4 or 5 of them today. I can download sound files and save them. I can calibrate this, and a calibrator is available for, a NIST traceable calibrator is available for about $1,000. So this is just an idea. I'm not suggesting that this is what we do, but we buy one, stick it at the library. Longmont City tells users that if you download X, Y, and Z app, you go to the library, you calibrate your phone, and then you use it. And if you can calibrate a sound that does this, you can take a picture of the vehicle that's making it, and maybe, people can start to address things that affect them individually rather than waiting for a policeman to come to their neighborhood and wait for the noise to happen. And one other point I wanted to add is that we've been woken up at night in the last couple of weeks at 3 in the morning. And like I said, our house is 100 feet from the road. Inside our house, we are inside our house 100 feet from the road. And we still can be waken up. And so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bev Bowman. Bob Bowman, sorry.
No problem. Good evening. My name is Bob Bowman, and my address is 1232 Vassar Court here in Longmont. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Longmont Pickleball Club. My hope this evening is to continue to impress upon the council the importance of supporting the Longmont Parks and Recreation budget and hopefully earmarking funds towards the development of more permanent pickleball-specific courts throughout the city. As you've heard before, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the U.S. According to the National Sports and Fitness Association, nationwide there are 4.8 million players with an average growth rate of 11.5% per year over the last 5 years. The average age for players is not old like me, but is 34 and dropping as more and more schools are adding pickleball to their curriculum. With what is estimated with over 1,800 pickleball players in Longmont and growing exponentially each year, there is a definite need for additional pickleball-specific courts, not somewhere down the road, but now. Several years ago, the Longmont Parks and Rec Department, with financial support from several members of the local pickleball community, turned 2 relatively unused tennis courts located at Hover Park into 6 permanent designated pickleball courts. Today, these courts are frequently overcrowded with players of all ages, sexes, and races participating in open play and rec department lessons. These 6 courts are not only available at no cost, but they're actually generating income for the city through both lesson and court rental fees. The Longmont Pickleball Club is successfully working with both the Parks and Rec Department and the Longmont Tennis Association to identify additional locations to develop full-time pickleball courts. But city funds are required to resurface, line, and provide permanent nets. By comparison to Longmont's 6 permanent designated public pickleball courts, the city of Loveland has 12, Fort Collins 8, Arvada 24 permanent dedicated public pickleball courts. According to the website Global Tennis Network, there are 48 permanent designated permanent public tennis courts in Longmont, serving a low to no growth tennis community. Longmont has only 6 permanent designated pickleball courts, serving a large and fast-growing pickleball community. Your support and direction to the City Parks and Rec Department to address the immediate need for additional full-time, permanent, designated pickleball courts in Longmont will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Jim and Erica Hallberg.
Yeah, my name is Jim Holbert, my wife Erica. I'm just going to read really quick. The City Council's vision for Longmont people in 20 years. Longmont will be the world's greatest village where children are most fortunate to be born and raised. Elders are supported through their entire life, where people will have access to food, shelter, and everybody will be happy. That's really lovely. However, we've been here over 15 years, and we've seen the crime escalate and skyrocket. And based on that agenda of the next 20 years, what you envision is not happening. And it's very unfortunate. The car thefts are out of control in our neighborhood. I mean, like if you lived over by Skyline High School or Centennial Pool, you've heard 3, and from your house, 3 gunshot firings in the last 90 days, high-speed chases on Mountain View, and it's just unacceptable. You know, my daughter goes to school here. We wanted to raise our family here, but the level of crime throughout the city, from people I've talked to, going to Chipotle on 17th, you know, it's just not the city we envision living in. Now, city manager, I'm sure is a very nice guy. I don't have any judgment. But when I read in the papers about some large raises where our crime is a problem and we're expanding at an exponential rate, and I don't think we're supporting the police force to expand with that rate of population growth. I just think that something needs to be, looked at to make some changes to see, you know, whether it's prevention or more police on the street. You know, obviously we want to hire more. I'm assuming. And we support the police. You know, we need the police. I don't know where you guys live, but if you drove around some neighborhoods, it's pretty crazy. And these aren't always at night. These things are happening in broad daylight. So.
We've been native Coloradans, and obviously Colorado has changed a lot, and Longmont's changed a lot to the point that despite us wanting to live here, we're looking to move out of the city. And we're not the only people that work, that pay taxes, that are done with the homelessness and the crime, and nothing seeming to be supporting the police and making us as citizens and residents feel safe and welcome in our own town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lance Whitaker.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. You're going to have to forgive me on this National Day of Forgiveness because I'm working off bullet points today. My name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street, as you all know. I've been a resident for 40 years. A voting libertarian. Long live the porcupine. Today is National Chocolate Milk Day, so everybody enjoy your chocolate milk tonight. A special shout out goes out to Deborah Williams, my new Zoom friend. Thank you for your support. Me and Glenn recently had a meeting, and while we didn't talk about marijuana hospitality, we did get to talk a lot about Kensington Park and making it a safer park, and had come up with a couple maybe solutions that you may want to talk to him on. He had mentioned that I could start this business without a hospitality license, and I don't know if it was more of a statement or a question, but I figured I'd clarify today. The reasons why I would not want to start without a hospitality license is A, it would attract customers that I do not want, namely kids. There would also be limited hours due to city regulations involving school hours. And frankly, I just don't want to be someone's after-school babysitter. I'm probably not very good at that. The customers I do want to attract would be parents who smoke but do not want to smoke in front of their kids, and maybe need a place to relax and unwind before they go out to dinner or a theater or other entertainment. People who smoke in cars and parks because of rental agreements. They have nowhere else to go. They end up in parks or in their cars, which is not a very good idea to be smoking in cars. Also, tourists that have no legal way to smoke and end up also smoking in their cars or in their parks. So as you can see, in a very minor way, this could be a crime prevention tool in getting people out of their cars. Anyone wishing to, speak either for or against marijuana hospitality can freely come by my house anytime. I live at 1750 Collier Street, which is right in the middle of town.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Randy Mormon.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and the Longmont City Council. My name is Randy Mormon, and I am the Legislative and Community Campaigns Director at EcoCycle. And thank you for the opportunity tonight to provide comments on the Zero Waste Resolution. Many of you know that we have a long history of partnership with the City of Longmont that dates back to 1984 when we started for the first time collecting recyclables at the curb using school buses and volunteers. I am proud to see how much progress we have made since then. And your efforts have paid off, making you the third highest residential recycling and composting rate in the state at 42%, according to EcoCycle and CoPerg's annual State of Recycling and Compost report. You are a model for other cities, including mine, the city of Arvada, where I serve on city council. We look to you and not that other Boulder County city. Setting goals is extremely important. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has stressed the role that cities like Longmont can play in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We don't have time to waste. Recycling and composting are one of the most effective and efficient actions we can take at the local level today, and everyone in the community can participate. That is why it is so important that you adopt the most aggressive goals you can today. 75% waste diversion by 2030 and 95% waste diversion by 2050. And that's, I believe, in your alternative 2 option. By adopting these more aggressive goals, you will be setting yourselves on a path to significantly reducing your climate impact and doing it in a fair and equitable manner. When Longmont sets a goal, the community works together to achieve it, and the rest of us in the state will take note and follow your lead. I want to call out several of those important actions that we believe are integral to your success. One is adopting a universal recycling ordinance that will increase access to recycling and composting, including residents living in apartments and condominiums and also businesses. This is an equity issue, and we have to ensure incentives and discounts are used to ensure fair and equitable services to all. The second action is providing curbside composting to all residents as part of their waste services. So much of our waste going to the landfill is organic food and yard waste that creates methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, 85 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. Finally, we know how important it is to educate our future community members on the practices of zero waste. EcoCycle is a proud partner with the city and St. Vrain Valley School District on our Green Star Schools program. To date, 12 Longmont City schools are participating, that's 55% of the schools, in a recycling and composting program with teachers engaging the entire school community in reuse and other zero waste activities. As stated in the resolution, we'd like to make it 100% of Longmont schools, and we look forward to working with you to make that a reality. Together, we've made great strides towards zero waste in Longmont, and we look forward to working with you in this next phase and encourage you to go big, go with Alternative 2, and continue to set the example for the rest of the state.
Thank you, Randy. And Naomi Kurland.
Good evening. My name is Naomi Kurland, and I live at 2073 Goldfinch Court. I am the board chair for Sustainable Resilient Longmont and SRL's Zero Waste Committee. This year, our committee secured a Boulder County grant to increase waste diversion at multicultural festivals in Longmont through zero waste education. Nadine mentioned volunteering at one of those last weekend. We also host monthly community cleanups in city parks and greenways. We are committed to seeing Longmont improve our waste diversion by empowering residents with more opportunities to do so. We have participated in multiple feedback sessions with city staff on the zero waste resolution, and we are very happy to see the hard work of all involved culminate in the drafts that are being presented tonight. Sustainable Resilient Longmont and EcoCycle members are wearing green tonight to show our support for the revised draft of the new zero waste resolution, particularly that second version being presented tonight. We are also looking forward to seeing a draft for a universal recycling ordinance from city staff by the end of this year, which will help make some of the goals stated in the zero waste resolution into real city policy. We know that the update of our city's zero waste resolution is the first step towards a zero waste Longmont, and we will be there every step of the way to support policy that upholds the new zero waste resolution, such as the development of a universal recycling ordinance. We support the recommended actions and policies that are listed in the new zero waste resolution draft and urge City Council to vote for version B, or Alternative 2, which specifies waste diversion targets of 75% by 2030 and 95% by 2050. We believe it is crucial in this time of climate crisis for our city to be as aspirational as possible. If we set our goals as high as we could possibly be achieved, we communicate our strong commitment to a sustainable future for Longmont, and city staff will be further incentivized to design public policy for maximum impact. Tonight, you have the opportunity to shape the future of our city's waste policy. Please vote yes on version B of the zero waste resolution and help make Longmont a beautiful place to live for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. So that ends public invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing none, I close public invited to be heard. Oh, of course.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Here's my inquiry. We've heard in multiple meetings from our pickleball community asking us to allocate funds to expedite the development of more pickleballs. So my question really, I guess, is to staff. Is anybody following up with our pickleball community to explain the $18 million that we have backlogged for park development, which is would take 20 years to clear without additional staffing? I know you have a plan for this, but this is not a matter of additional budgeting of capital funds. It's a matter of staffing this in a way that gets the funds out. And then what's the process? Starting with public engagement and listening to what the priorities are, community by community or park by park. We keep going through this, and I think we owe it to them to explain where we are. So if we don't put more money into a budget for pickleballs, it's not because we don't care about pickleball, because we've already put $18 million in the budgets that aren't getting moved into the field. And you have a plan for doing that, but I think we owe people that information.
So thank you for that. I am suggesting that during council comments tonight, let's discuss it as a council very shortly and decide if we want to make a motion to move this forward as far as community conversation and explanation, not necessarily in the budget process. So we are now at the consent agenda and introduction of readings by title. I do want to make a statement here, though, before we do this. At the last two council meetings were very long, very long. And we have a lot of people in this audience and on this council who have to go to work tomorrow. So I am going to hold everybody to the 5 minutes discussion on each topic. So please make your comments concise and your questions concise so that we can move through this agenda in a timely manner. So, Dawn, would you read the consent items on the consent agenda into the record, please?
Absolutely, Mayor. The ordinances on this agenda will be on second reading and public hearing on October 11th, 2022. Item 9A is Ordinance 2022-31, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 10.20, Section 10.20.100 of the Longmont Municipal Code on unreasonable noises, prohibited prima facie unreasonable noises. 9B is Resolution 2022-143, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the funding award agreement with the Colorado State Patrol for the Beat Auto Theft Through Law Enforcement Task Force. 9C is Resolution R22-144, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for parent education services. 9D is Resolution 2022-145, a resolution of the Longmont City Council urging Longmont residents to vote yes on Proposition 108, which is correctly stated as 123, dedicated state income tax revenue for affordable housing programs on the November 8th statewide election ballot. And 9E is approve Housing and Human Services Advisory Board recommendation for an affordable housing fund loan for the Zinnia Permanent Supportive Housing Project.
Thank you. Do we want to pull any items from the consent agenda? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Rebecca. I wasn't going to pull an item. It would help me. I'm not challenging your authority as the mayor to impose Rule 4 of our rules and procedures, or 25B or whatever the number is. I'm just curious about why tonight, with the budget discussions and things that are on this agenda, why tonight as opposed to other nights?
I guess my point is that we've all read the budget, and 5 minutes is pretty good time even for the U.S. Congress to be able to make their point, ask their question, and move on. So
I wouldn't. I don't mean to be argumentative. When we're debating, I get that, to put a limit on it. But when we're trying to learn something, it just seems to me that we are obligated to the public to be as informed as we need to be to make good decisions. That's why we're elected. And to constrain that, if you can learn what you can in 5 minutes and then do the best you can with that, just seems inconsistent with what we're trying to do with this idea of studies. That's all. So,
thank you, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I would like to pull item D for discussion.
Thank you, and I'll pull item A. And with that, I move the consent agenda minus item A and item D. All those in favor, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. So we're going to move on right on to ordinances on second reading and public hearing. Does anybody need a break up here? We're good to go? Okay. Item A is an ordinance 2022-34, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2022. Are there any questions from council? Do we have a staff report on this? No. I'd like to open public hearing. Does anybody want to speak on Ordinance 0-2022-34? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Can I have a motion from a council member to move this? So it's moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo-Faring. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. Item B is Ordinance 0-2022-35, an ordinance adopting by reference and enacting the Code of Ordinances, City of Longmont, Colorado, providing for the repeal of certain ordinances not included therein, providing for the adoption of secondary codes by reference, providing a penalty for the violation thereof, providing for the manner of amending such code, and providing when such code and this ordinance shall become effective. Is there a staff report on this? No. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I'd like to open the public hearing on Ordinance 0-2022-35. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Can I have a motion?
I'll move Ordinance 2022-35.
So it's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo-Faring, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor? I don't know why I say that. Let's just vote. And that carries unanimously. And we are now on to items removed from the consent agenda. We'll go in order, and I pulled item A, which is the a bill for an ordinance amending it is the noise ordinance. And I do have a question. When we are measuring the noise from 300 feet away, it's not where the noise starts at 300 feet. That is the maximum. For example, it's from 0 to 300 feet. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, so 300 feet is the distance away from the source of the noise that we would have to measure to in order to have a violation.
So I'm assuming that the noise is coming from 0 feet to 300 feet.
That is correct, Mayor.
So if you live 25 feet away from that, that is being measured because if it goes out to 300 feet.
Yeah, and 300 feet was the length of distance that we found where the level of noise met the same ambient noise level of the neighborhood. And that's why we got to 300 feet. Remember that math that we had showed how we started at 25, then we backed it up to 100, and then ended up at 300 so we could match that ambient noise level of the neighborhood. So anything beyond that ambient noise level should be in and of itself a prima facie violation of the noise ordinance.
So is there a time limit as far as when the noise starts and when it's measured?
No, as far as time limit?
No, what I'm saying is if someone is playing their stereo loud or for 2 minutes versus.
Yeah, you're correct, Mayor. There is
blocks.
No, it could be 5 seconds, it could be 5 minutes.
Okay. Is there ever a time, I'm trying to answer, get David's comment to figure that out. Is there ever a time when it's really, really loud, but it doesn't meet the 300 feet parameters?
Only for motor vehicle engine noise and exhaust noise. For other types of noise, like loud car stereos, we're still at the current ordinance limit of 25 feet.
Okay. So the loud car noise would be 300 feet.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'm going to move Ordinance 0-2022-31. Second. Let's vote. Are there any discussion? No. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Ordinance D 2022-146. This is Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. When a ballot question changes state from titled to certified as having sufficient petitions on the ballot, the number by which it is denoted changes. And unfortunately, in this resolution, the pre-certification number rather than the post-certification number was used. Therefore, I move that on item D, we change wherever it occurs, the designation question 108 to the designation question 126.
I'll second that. 123.
123, excuse me. See how hard this is? Yeah, okay.
So I'm glad you did that because I was getting 1A, B, and C all mixed up.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Okay, so that motion was made by Councilor Martin, and I seconded that. No discussion, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Councilor Martin, do you want to move this ordinance?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I move ordinance R.
No, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. We can't move this because we changed it. So we don't want to move the one.
Somebody else has to do it. That's fine.
You can move it as amended. Oh.
I move ordinance D, or the resolution D, R 2022-145 as amended.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. So, thank you. We are now at general business. This is going to be our 2023 budget discussion and first public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Teresa Malloy, Budget Manager. Get our presentation up here for you.
Mind if I sneak in here and share that?
Thank you. So this evening, our budget topics are, we have the three items that Christina Pacheco is going to talk to you about that were delayed from last week. Then we're going to talk to you about our priority-based budgeting and our 2023 budget, our financial policies, and the public safety take-home vehicle program. And we also do, per our city charter, have to hold our first public hearing. And we'd like to leave it up to council whether you want to do that before we have these items the staff wants to present to you, or after. Either way.
Do we have any comments on whether we want to have public hearing before the items are read or after? Is there any discussion on that? Let's have them after then. All those. Just nod your head. Are you agreed to that? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So we'll have public discussion after.
After. Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina then. And you're going to drive, right?
Yes, I can run it. Hey, Christina, are you there?
Thank you, Teresa. Hi, Dallas. Thank you.
Sure thing. Let me get you back here.
All right. Get to the first slide. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So you might need to switch to the next one. There we go. All right. Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. I'm Christina Pacheco, Division Manager for Children, Youth, and Families. Tonight, I'm here to talk about our early childhood and mental health budget requests for 2023. I have a few slides to present, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. So let's go ahead and start with this first slide, early childhood education. In early childhood capacity building, we have the support and design development of an early childhood community hub that would focus on serving children ages 0 to 5. The hub would bring together in one facility professional development, support for families, and support for providers. In addition, kind of connected to this, the city was awarded a grant for $500,000 from the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, of which 25% or $125,000 would be matched from the funds requested for 2023. This collaborative project is between Wild Plum, TLC, and the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition. The funds would be utilized for architectural design of the facility, and pre-construction preparation of the site, as well as general liability insurance. The funds would be expended in 2023, and this contract with the state is going to be under review with the city attorney's office, and it'll come before council as an IGA soon. Go ahead and switch to the next slide, Dallas. So again, these funds are meant to strengthen our early childhood system using this hub model. And the really interesting part of this model is that the ongoing funds in this area would offset some of the costs and designate spots for interested City of Longmont employees to obtain care for their children through this hub. Next slide. In 2022, Children, Youth, and Families contracted with St. Marion Education Foundation in the amount of $245,000 for the 529 JUMP program, a community program that brings family awareness to the importance of saving for post-secondary education by opening a tax-deductible college savings account. We know that the majority of jobs in Colorado require a college degree, and this is a way for us to invest in our youth. It's a partnership with the City of Longmont, St. Marion Valley School District, and St. Marion Education Foundation as a fiscal agent. The City of Longmont provided the initial $25,000 of seed money, and the 2023 budget enhances the program in some ways that I want to talk about in this next slide. Go ahead and switch. So as of September 20th of this year, there were 180 students signed up for a 529 account. The partnership that I talked about meets regularly, and utilizing this cultural broker lens and expertise, we expanded the sign up into this program to go through third grade. We know that parents of kindergartners, especially first-time parents, have a lot of competing interests and are really just adjusting to school that kindergarten year. So expansion of this sign-up time gives us more time to connect with them. And we also, Children, Youth, and Families also does some programming in schools at that second and third grade level. So it's another way to tie in the work that we're already doing. So next slide. So earlier this year, we'll move into mental health now. So earlier this year, Council directed 50% of the non-earmarked special marijuana sales tax funds to be used for mental health and addiction. In this 2023 budget, we're proposing that $290,000 from this be used for outreach and therapeutic services to include support for our unhoused community members. The City of Longmont has been working on mental health and addiction even prior to the pandemic, but with COVID, we also saw an even greater impact in these areas. Next slide. So as a response, what we did is we held a virtual mental health conference in December of 2021, right during the pandemic shutdown. We had a de-escalation training by Ryan Dowd this last year for frontline staff, and also had a training on the impact of secondary trauma for employees from Children, Youth, and Families, Senior Services, Community and Neighborhood Resources, and Longmont Housing Authority. It's also our intent to convene the SAM task force again, now post-pandemic, to begin to leverage mental health and addiction work that's occurring community-wide, so that we can best use the resources that we have. So with that, those are the slides that I have that just kind of give an overview of what we're talking about in these two areas, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilors have any questions? Seeing none. Is this the end of your presentation, Christina, or?
It is, yeah. I'm just here to answer any questions if you have any.
I think they're good, Christina.
I think we're all good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Bye, Dallas. Thank you for your help.
No problem.
Thanks, Teresa.
So in your council packet, we did give you a history of our priority-based budgeting through the years. I wasn't planning on going through that, but what I do want to kind of take you through at a very high level is just a brief overview of our process, because it is a multi-step process that kind of builds on each former step. So the first step is to identify the right results. And those really are out of our Envision Longmont master plan. And then the next step is to define and value those results. And what we mean by value those results, that was a community process that we did in 2018, where we asked the community to place a value on these results relative to each other. And the percentages that you see on the screen here for these results are the outcome of that community process. And this plays into and is utilized in our scoring process. It's how we weight the scoring, which then really weights the scoring based on that community process. So then the next step is to score the city programs, and that the score is multifaceted. There is a component for how well the program influences those results, and then there is basic program attributes, things like is the program mandated, and if so, at what level? Is it a federal mandate, a state mandate, a local mandate? How many people does the program support throughout the community? Does the program generate revenue? So those are the types of basic program attributes, and so each program is really scored for its result influence as well as the basic program attributes, and then what we get is a prioritized list of city services in quartiles, and this graph, and unfortunately it is kind of small, but the top graph really is showing you our 2023 proposed budget. The darker blue is the 23 proposed budget versus the 22 adopted budget, the lighter blue by quartile, quartile 1 through 4. So quartile 1 are those highest scored programs, those that most align with the results and that scored the highest for the basic program attributes. And really what we wanted to point out is that a very large portion of our 23 proposed budget, as well as the 22 adopted budget, supports are in programs that are in that quartile 1. So very strongly aligned with our priorities. And then the bottom graph that shows the 2023 general fund only here, ongoing requests. And again, by quartile, 1 through 4. And again, quartile 1 has the most cost in it. So we're putting funding, additional funding, to those very high ranked programs. I also wanted to point out that in your packet, attachment M is the first graph for every. So this one is citywide, but in the packet we also included that similar graph for every major operating fund: the general fund, the water fund, the electric and broadband street funds. So you can see fund by fund those quartile graphs. And so next I'm going to turn it over to Melody, who is actually going to take you through 3 things. So she's going to take you through our open PBB data. So that's the information that we have on our website. She's going to walk you through how we incorporated equity into our program scoring. And then she's going to show you our more detail on our 2023 budget requests and how they align with the quartiles and the equity scoring.
Teresa, before we move on, do counselors have any questions or comments about these graphs, what went into the quartiles, and what were in each level? I do have one question on quartile 1. Can I assume that those are all of the programs that actually operate the city, water, sewer, that keep the city going?
So Melody is much more intimate with these programs, and I'm going to have her come up and talk to you about the quartile ones, but yes,
okay.
I mean, basically.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Melody Polero, the Senior Budget Analyst, and I'm going to open this link here. So what this is from our budget webpage on the city's website, you can access our public-facing priority-based budgeting tool. Hopefully. All right, so once this loads, what you're going to see is the city's line item budget and how we've allocated that line item budget to the programs, and then how those programs align with the city's priorities. And that is shown down here below. And so we are going to take a look at the 22 adopted budget. You can also view past budgets in here as well. And then you can take a look at all of this data in two different ways. So you can view it by looking at our program attributes, which Teresa just briefly mentioned. And those are listed across the top here. And as you can see, we've now included equity as part of that program scoring within the program attributes. And then what I want to dive deeper into are how the programs score against our community results. So across the top here, each of our community results, what they are, and then how they are defined, as well as our governance results. And as you click through each one of these colored boxes, it will change to that result. And below down here, the boxes will change. And then it also gives you a definition of each of those results. So if I take a look at the housing services, amenities, and opportunities for all, I am taking a look down here at the entire city's budget, and based on how we've allocated all of these programs to that budget by department. So I can further dive into a specific department. So if I want to look at community services, I can see all of the divisions within community services and how they allocated their resources to these programs within this specific community result. And so I'm going to take a look at senior services. And you can see all of the programs within community services that have allocated their resources to this specific result. And you can see the boxes are different colors as well as different sizes. So the darker shaded the boxes, the higher that program scored against the result. And if you hover over the different boxes, you can see that this had a score of 4. And I can come down to this lighter colored box and it only scored a 2 against this community result. And then the size of the box is represented by how much we're allocating to that program in total. So you can see senior-led activities we're only allocating $25,000 to, but basic needs, information, referral, and assistance, we're allocating almost $340,000 to that program. And then for specific program information, you can select any program. It provides a description of what that program is, the total cost, again, that we've allocated to that program, and the number of FTE allocated to that program. And this breaks it out by personnel costs as well as non-personnel costs. And then we can select positions, and we can take a look at which positions we've allocated to this program. And then we can also look at the operating costs by line item budgets that we've allocated to this program. And then we can click back to where we started and take a look at any other programs. And then I wanted to just show you real quick, we talk a lot about quartiles and where programs fall within a quartile. And you can view that as well by selecting this overall tab. And then I can come back to that same program I was just looking at, and I can see that it received a rating of quartile 2, so it's a fairly highly aligned program within this community results. Any questions on that before I move forward? Okay.
Seeing none, I think we're good to go on.
Thank you. All right, so now the next slide I want to talk about is how we included equity into our priority-based budgeting process. So in the 22 budget, we created equity insights based off of our equity team's definition of equity. And we asked departments to take a look at all of their priority-based budgeting programs or the services that we provide and think about how those services really play a role into these equity insights that we defined. So that was what we did in 22. And then as part of the 2023 budget process, we turned those equity insights into a basic program attribute. So with the help of the equity team, we created a scoring matrix kind of off of those equities so that we could actually incorporate an equity score into those programs. And then we asked departments to take a look at each of their programs and take a look at that scoring and tell us how equity is a part of each of those programs. And once we've did all of that work, we created a peer review team. And the majority of the members on that peer review team were equity team members. And we had a lot of great conversations about how those programs scored against that equity component. And we've provided in your packet a reprioritized list of programs that now include that equity component. And then we highlighted the specific programs that either moved up a quartile or down a quartile that now have that included. Okay, so these next set of slides that I want to share is really a look at how the funded 2023 budget requests ranked at a program level against not only a quartile alignment, but also by that equity score. And so quartiles, just to familiarize you with the scoring, quartiles are represented as a score of 1 being most aligned to city priorities and a score of 4 being least aligned. And equity scores are represented as a 4 being the highest score a program could receive and 0 being the lowest score a program could receive. So that top graph represents all requests in all funds. And then that bottom graph is just the general fund and public safety fund pulled out so that you can see that separately. And then what I've highlighted in green are budget request dollars to programs that have scored highest against city priorities and equities. So the highest score that this could be achieved is a 1-4. And then what I've highlighted in red are request dollars in programs that are least aligned with city priorities and that equity component. And then this next graph represents a look at all of our ongoing level 1 requests at that program view. And so we had about $6.9 million of level 1 requests that are supported by 189 total programs. And of those 189 programs, 80% of those request dollars support 11 programs. And so off to the right, I've listed out which 11 programs those are, and I included which quartile those fall in, and then what equity score those programs received. So I also did this with a look at the ongoing level 2 requests, but just the FTE, since the majority of our level 2 requests are personnel. And so again, highlighted in green are the FTE in the highest scored quartile to equity component. So we had a total of 13.57 FTE that fell in that highest ranked programs. And I've listed those positions there. And then highlighted in red were the FTE in the lowest scored quartile to equity component, and that consisted of only 0.67 FTE, which I've listed there as well. And then finally, this is the same graphical that you saw for ongoing level 1, but for one-time requests. And again, highlighted in green are those requests that fall in the most aligned quartile to equity component. And then highlighted in red were the budget requests with that supported programs in the lowest equity to quartile component. And then another look at the one-time requests by program. So we had about $7.4 million of one-time requests that fell in 162 programs, and 20 programs made up 80% of those one-time requests. And again, I've listed those off to the right, along with which quartile they fall in and the equity score they received. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Do we have any questions on this report or comments? Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor. I actually do have a quick comment on this.
Okay.
I think when you look at priority-based budgeting, the thing that we've talked about in this is so what? And what does this mean and how successful are the programs? And so, you know, we've done some restructuring and we have Becky Doyle in the strategic integration piece. And that's going to be the next iteration of this, is where we're going to start building the metrics within our programs to then be able to eventually tie, here's where it's sitting within the priority structure, and are we successful in doing what we need to do, because then that can help us improve in the future. So there's going to be another step to this.
Okay. So, Teresa.
Financial policies. So just really quickly, a brief overview. Our financial policies are reviewed annually by staff, and then we present them to you. And they are adopted by resolution, which will happen on October 25th, and then they become effective on January of the following year. And I did want to point out that we have an attachment. It is attachment P. That is our complete financial policy list with all of the proposed revisions. I'm not going to go through all of those with you, but if you have questions on the ones that I don't touch on, I'm only going to touch on 4. Certainly, we can answer those questions. So the ones that I do want to talk to you about is one new financial policy, and this one is for the procurement thresholds. So this policy will set our procurement thresholds to match the federal grant thresholds for non-federal entities receiving federal funds. It's a mouthful. And basically, our purchasing and contracts manager wanted to bring this one forward because it will establish one set of standards regardless of the funding source. And the note at the bottom, she will be back to amend the purchasing code to incorporate these same thresholds into our purchasing code. And then I have 3 policies that are not new. We just have some updates to them that I wanted to bring to your attention. And the first one is our public educational and government access television services. And the change for this one is to move from 25% of the cable television franchise revenues to 50% that will be set aside for this purpose for 2 years, for 23 and 24.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump in on this one. So based on the conversation with council, Jim and I had some discussions on this one, and we basically structured the policy exactly as council directed. When we were looking at the funding options, in order not to have an issue with another policy in terms of one-time versus ongoing, one of the things that we wanted to bring to council's attention tonight is it is in the policy to fund it 50%, 50%. So we don't have to adjust the ongoing expenditures. We can cover the 2023 50% with one-time funds, and then in the 2024 budget, we'll just move it into the 50% on an ongoing basis. And so I wanted to touch base with council to see if that was a reasonable solution.
I do have a question for you. When we move into the 2024 ongoing fees, can we had asked, or I had asked, for a list of what services these franchise fees now cover? Is it just in the budget and in the general fund, and they're diverted everywhere, or are there specific items that those funds cover?
Mayor Peck, members of council, Jim Golden, Chief Financial Officer. So the rest of the franchise fees just go into the general fund like all other taxes to support services that do not have their own revenues to support them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this? Did you get the direction you needed there? Or do we need to make a motion for the...
If I can just get council, do you agree with us taking the approach on the one time to fill the gap?
Okay, thumbs up. Yes.
And the next policy I wanted to update you on is our health benefit fund policy. So the policy itself is not changing. It's the implementation statement, and what we added was the public safety physicals and counseling costs to be paid for out of this fund. And then finally, the special marijuana sales tax policy. So this one just follows along with that direction by council to place the other 1/2, transfer that to the general fund on an ongoing basis, and it needs to be used for mental health and addiction programs. So that is it on our policies. Do you have any questions on any of the other ones that are included in our attachment?
I don't see anybody in the queue. Is that attachment available to the general public?
We do. We'll put that out there on the website where we have all the other council communications and attachments and presentations. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
When everybody gets up here, I think they're on their way. So I want to introduce this a little bit, and it actually ties into some comments that were made earlier in why are we bringing the take-home car policy to the city council. The first thing I wanted to say, and over years it's hard to quantify numbers, but since 2017 we have increased the number of police officers. Now, we've actually had other increases in terms of corps and lead beyond this. But police officers, since 2017, we've added 21 officers to our police department. In talking to Zach earlier, this is where we were clarifying some numbers. We're authorized, we believe, up to 165 officers. So if you look back when we brought to some information that we had when we asked about the increase to the public safety sales tax, and we looked at a formula to figure out how many officers do you need, based on, Jim pulled it up, based on 100,000 population, we needed about 161. So we're right at that mark. The challenge that we're having when we look at our officers is that we have that many authorized positions, but we have a lot of vacancies. And when we look at the vacancies, there are a number of things that are coming into play. We can talk about I think nationally, cities across the nation are having difficulties hiring police officers. You all have probably seen that in various national news stories and things like that. So that's one issue that we have. When you take that into account, and you start adding competition in terms of what we're seeing from other jurisdictions, it's just adding to the difficulty in this. And as we were having the conversations, and I would say that I know all of the command staff, whether it's Zach or Jeff, and I know Dave Moore spent some time on this, Jason Moultrude, I think JB, James Brown spent some time on this. What we're really starting to see is this was something that people were bringing up in the hiring process. And when we really decided to look at this is when we had a couple of applicants that this was a point that, do I take a job here for this or do I not take a job here? And they went to where they had the take-home car program. So when you look at the number of officers we have, we're really having to look at what is the market in terms of what people are looking for to be hired. And this rose up. And so David Moore, Assistant Chief, will give you the presentation. But I just wanted to set that stage to say we have numbers. We just don't have the vacancies filled, and this is part of what we're trying to do in order to fill those vacancies, in addition to the other things that we've been talking about with Workforce of the Future and all of the other things that we're looking at as an organization, because it's exceptionally problematic here. We're seeing that same issue organization-wide.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for letting us bring this to the meeting tonight. I'm Assistant Chief David Moore. I preside over the Detective Division, and I'll be presenting the information on the take-home vehicle program. So first, we're going to get into some benefits. Other agencies describe this that have the take-home vehicle program as invaluable, a force multiplier, priceless, and a morale booster. So our hiring in 2022, we have hired 21 officers to date, and we've reached pretty much the end of what we can hire this year. We might be able to get a couple of laterals toward the end of the year, but that's pretty much going to be where we're at. It takes 12 months to hire and train a recruit officer. It will cost $87,000 to train and outfit one recruit officer, not including the cost of hiring and recruitment. 22 officers as of this week. We actually went into the negative. 22 officers have left in 2022, and that would be an estimated $1.9 million impact based on that $87,000 figure. Our recruitment and retention challenges. So other agencies are paying equal or similar salaries. Some agencies are offering signing bonuses. Approximately 80% of the Northern Front Range agencies have take-home vehicle programs. We're losing applicants and officers to agencies with take-home vehicle programs. When we talk about a morale booster, we did a survey recently, 97% response rate, with 87% of those people saying they would take advantage of a take-home vehicle program. As for the Northern Colorado agencies, Fort Collins, Loveland, Weld County, Larimer County, Windsor, Frederick, Colorado State, Boulder County mostly has a take-home vehicle program, though it's not full. Greeley PD and Meade PD are going to take-home vehicles next year. So as a force multiplier, officers are ready to respond to calls for service when they hit the city border parameters. They're ready to respond to larger emergencies such as the Marshall Fire, King Supers, and the 2013 flood. In each of those, we actually ran out of vehicles. We had more officers than vehicles. We also have homicides and the critical incident team where we have multiple people that need to be called, kind of all hands on deck, and we run out of vehicles in those as well. Thousands of hours saved on loading, unloading, and fueling daily, equals more officers on the street. We have quicker responses to in-progress emergencies and quicker responses when extra staffing is needed. A lot of times when we're getting a lot of calls for service, one shift will call in another shift early. As for safety and staff, for staff in the community, there'll be more parking at the Safety and Justice Building for the community. It's pretty much non-existent Monday through Friday if you've ever been there. You can see the picture at the lower left there. That was taken today at noon. At 2 o'clock, the officers coming in, the whole new shift, which is our biggest shift, would have no parking based on your picture there. We have more officers on the street equals quicker response time to calls for service and a greater ability to be proactive. More available parking for professional staff and available spaces specifically in the secured underground parking. So some of our dispatchers and other records folk will get off after hours when it's dark out and have to sometimes walk to the street to get to their vehicle because they're actually parked off site. Officers' personal vehicles are not on site, and officers are familiar with their vehicles. So each vehicle, not all of them, but there are several different variations of vehicle depending on the year, buttons in different locations, different safety equipment and whatnot. They would be familiar with their vehicle and how it handles, because each vehicle handles a little bit differently. As for accountability, the officers will be the sole driver of the vehicle, so they'll take better care and maintenance of the vehicle. Is one thing we heard from all the agencies with take-home vehicle programs, is that their officers care much greater for their vehicles because they know it's theirs long-term, and so the maintenance and care is much better. This leads to greater longevity of the vehicle. So although this is an 8-year plan going from a 4-year rotation to an 8-year rotation on the vehicles, we believe we may even get more out of those on the ones that are lower mileage. And that's something that fleet takes care of. They look at maintenance and all that and mileage before they determine that. So that's just an anticipated thing. We don't have any hard data on that right now. Strict take-home vehicle policy to avoid potential for abuse. We would have a 25-mile residency restriction. Minimal deviation from the most direct course from work to their residence unless they're on call and have to be in their vehicle so they can respond immediately to the department. And then officers are restricted with respect to off-duty use. So basically no off-duty unless you're on call or otherwise approved by the chief. So as for implementation, the cost and how we're going to roll out, and then the financial gain to the city. The cost of the program, the initial cost will be $4.2 million over 3 years to purchase 59 total vehicles. 43 of those vehicles will be police rated and 16 will be civilian rated. 2023 funding to purchase 20 vehicles and to cover the unexpected inflation we had this year. For depreciation on our current fleet, we have $1.44 million in the general fund and $570,000 from the public safety going towards this first year. Estimated increase to the operation and maintenance of the vehicle is $120,000 per year. Average patrol vehicle cost with necessary equipment is $73,000. The average civilian rated vehicle cost is $36,000. We're looking at a 3-year rollout, 20 vehicles in 2023, 20 in 2024, and 19 in 2025. This will allow for the cost of the program to be dispersed across 3 years. Allows fleet the greater ability to acquire the vehicles. In other words, the dealer availability of vehicles. And then allows vendors more time to build the vehicle. So we have a contractor that builds the vehicle. We have to wire them special, put in special equipment. That's done by one of our contractors. And also this will work in concert with us moving toward a hybrid vehicle program from your initiative. We hope that the fuel cost will offset some of the O&M expenditure, and that obviously it'll be environmentally friendly. So the financial gain to the city, as I stated, the program is based on an 8-year rotation as opposed to the current 4-year rotation. So essentially right now we buy one vehicle every 4 years for 2 officers. This would be one vehicle every 8 years for each officer. So you're buying the same amount of vehicles after your initial buy-in. And as I stated, the initial investment of $4.2 million is what we'd have to pay over that first 3 years, but that will be recuperated across time through the savings from the program. As for the savings, it's going to save time between the shifts from switching cars, and other things such as fueling, loading, and unloading your car take a lot of hours. We estimate that it's around just over 13,000 hours a year for patrol alone in time we spend doing those vehicle inspections, loading equipment, and unloading equipment and fueling. So as a soft cost, this is an annual savings of about $500,000. So open up the floor for questions.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Good presentation, right? The data are really impressive and well presented. Quick question, just in terms of options. There was a high percentage of officers who expressed their preference for this. If an officer wasn't one of those and didn't want to drive the vehicle home, do they have the option to still use their own personal vehicle?
Yes, so what we would do, we would still buy the same number of vehicles, and it would be what we call a one-to-one program as opposed to a take-home. So they would still have all their equipment in the car.
The loading and unloading, all those issues are addressed.
All of that is still a savings to the city. We would just not save the parking space.
Got it.
Is essentially what happens.
Can I ask two related questions? You showed us the faces of new officers and how many we've been able to add, and you mentioned going into the negative, which we've lost more than we've added, I think is what the message was. It would be, you mentioned the $87,000 to train an officer. That's through the academy, I assume.
Correct. That is, so we have approximately 4 months of academy time. We have the cost of the academy. We pay their salary while they're in the academy. We have approximately 5 months of field training
That was
program.
that was a follow-on question.
So we're paying their salary for that. So we're basically paying 2 officers to be in one car. So you're only getting the benefit of 1 officer during their training.
Could you unpack that just a little bit? And part of the reason, I was in a conversation with somebody yesterday, pretty well-informed, a member of the community, who made the statement, and I didn't have I have a son who spent 8 years as a police officer in Tucson, Arizona. So, we lived through the academy and FTO and, and all that, and all that it means, how important it is. But the comment was made about that you're required more training to be a barber, I think was the example, in Colorado than to be a police officer. And I said, where'd you get that? I mean, but I didn't have the details to say, well, let me just line this out for you. Here's what they experience in the academy. Here's how long it takes, the hours, the standards, and then there's this whole thing called FTO, right? They're not on the job by themselves until they've cleared with senior officers who are trained as field trainers.
That's correct.
Could you just give us that? And I don't want to bog it down, but I just think that's an important part of this conversation for us to hear and for the public to hear.
So I don't know the current credit that you get for going through the academy, but I believe it's the equivalent of a full years of college credit when you go through the academy. I believe it's 12 to 15 credit hours. It's a 4-month program, full-time, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You're attending the academy for a solid 4 months. Once you get out of the academy, we also put you through a 6-week call it a mini academy, where we teach report writing and some other things that you need as your basics for the FTO program. And then after that 6 weeks, you go into a 5-month, 20-week program, which can be extended and oftentimes is, because there are many things to learn. It's not an easy job. So some of our lateral people who have been doing the job will graduate in less time than that 20 weeks, but it's definitely a flexible moving target. And if we have to spend 24 or 30 weeks with an officer, we will to get them trained. But yes, it's a solid 9 to 10 months of straight training full time before you get to be out on your own. And then once you're out on your own, your FTO is your mentor, and you're constantly asking questions. You really don't get the feel for a police job until you're about 3 years in. That's when you're fairly confident you can handle just about anything that comes your way. But it's a significant learning curve on the profession.
So on that, just the last question here would be, just kind of summarize, what does the training and professional development, now we're through FTO, but there's never an end to the learning curve.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we train, a lot of times we try not to train during the summer just because it's our busy months, but we'll train 9 months out of the year in service weekly on different topics such as tactics and legal. The legal changes are hard to keep up by themselves, but we do legal training, tactical training. We do all kinds of education on domestic violence and our Project Rewind. And all of those things get trained annually to keep our officers up to speed. And some of those are moving. Like we'll do domestic violence training 1 year, and then that'll be sex abuse training the next year. But some of them are standard, like the post requirements of driver's training and defensive tactics and all that is standard de-escalation training. We do that yearly. So we're constantly being trained.
Thank you. I hope our new reporters pick some of that up and include it in their stories tomorrow.
And I think what Dave didn't say in this, and I see these because I have to approve them, is when folks go through the academy and they're going through the field training component, not everyone makes it through it. And so what they do is try to take as much time as they can with individuals to get them where they're ready to be on the street. But if they don't feel like they're ready, there's been a handful that have come to me where it's just not ready, we're not comfortable. And so there's decision making to the very end of the FTO program on individuals. And then they're talking, and then Zach brings that to me as they're looking at those decisions.
So seeing no one else, Councillor Hidalgo-Farrig.
Thank you, Mayor. So you had mentioned some $500,000 in savings. Is that tell me more? Is that after? Well, first of all, is it after the initial purchase of the vehicles, the 2020 and 19?
So the $500,000 I was referring to is actually soft cost savings. It's the hourly savings. If you use the salary of the median salary of a level 2 to level 5 officer, it would be approximately $500,000 in savings for those hours saved, loading, unloading, refueling, inspections, weapons checks for your vehicle. It's 13,000 plus hours, adds up to $500,000. That's not a hard cost savings, so we can't directly apply that to this program. Now the $200,000 in savings from the depreciation change and in running our cars for 8 years as opposed to 4, that's a hard cost. We will save in Mr. Golden's experience, he estimated $200,000 a year in savings for this program over what we're currently doing. So that's a hard cost savings.
And to get a little technical, we were just talking about that. We call that cost avoidance, because what it really is that if you were going to make up for it lets you avoid adding additional officers to make up the time that you're losing when they're doing all of this work. And so,
and those additional officers I didn't mention is the 6.5 full-time officers that we're saving in time. So it's essentially putting 6.5 more officers out on the street annually.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I think that's key. That's important to note, because I have received several emails, some in concern, and a few people had commented on about putting police officers in danger if they're bringing their vehicles home. So I would just like your input for public record.
Yes, thank you. Actually, we have had situations at work where we were in danger bringing our personal vehicles to work, where we actually recently, probably it's been several months, but we had a person try to put a tracker on one of our officers' vehicles. So not having your personal vehicle at work is more safe than having your work vehicle at home, because I believe most officers are going to, as I get back to the strict policy that we've come up with, you have to download all your equipment out of your car if you're going to leave it outside. So I think a lot of officers are going to protect that vehicle in their garages, which in turn, keeps it from being a target out in front of someone's house. But I think it's actually more beneficial to have the take home from a safety perspective.
Okay, well that makes sense, and I am in support as a union negotiator for my district. Our first and foremost is recruitment and retainment of our workers, and it sounded like, from my understanding in reading through the packet, it was really coming from employees, potential employees, as well as current employees, that this is the ask that they're needing in order to keep saving our protecting our fine city. So thank you.
And may I go back to your question, Councilman Waters? I got texted from someone in the audience that's wearing a uniform and very big. He said 40 credit hours and 556 contact hours in the academy. So it's the equivalent of 3 semesters of school in 4 months.
Yeah, see him out there. So I do have a question, Carol, going back to your explanation as to why we need for retainment, just hiring. In earlier conversations, we had also stated that housing, that officers could not afford to live here, so they would move outside the city, and that was one reason, am I correct, in why we needed to let them have a car to take home? Is that part of our charter?
Well, part of it is, housing's a different question, and that's really something that we're seeing organization-wide, actually. And I think what we're seeing is we have more and more officers that have lived here, that are moving out. I know we have some that get apartments here. When they try to find a house, they can't find houses that are affordable. And so it is part of the equation.
Okay.
Sometimes officers may feel more comfortable not being in the community that they police, and so there's a lot of different pieces, but housing's a big component of this.
Okay.
And I think that's a different question, and that's really kind of getting into the attainable housing conversation that we're having, in that if you had affordable housing, you may have more of our staff generally choose to live in our community. I think where that comes into play, and where this will bridge the gap, is what we're seeing in other positions, and I've seen a lot of this recently, is a lot of our folks live north of us, and this is non-police officers. If a job opens and you live in Loveland, or you live in, I was going to say Thornton, but it's not Thornton, in the Tinmouth area or Windsor area, and a job opens and you get that job, you're saving yourself a lot of commute time. This is bridging a little bit of that for them, but I think it's something we still need to be focused on, is really having that attainable housing in our community, because that's something that's also going to help us too. But it's not as directly connected to this, but I think it's one of the many variables that we're trying to manage organization-wide in terms of recruitment and retention.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was great.
Thank you, Council Mayor.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
can, I just wanted to add a couple of budgetary postscripts to this. So I wanted to explain how we've handled this. First of all, this has been worked on for most of this year and throughout the budget process, and it's taken a lot of turns and changes to it. So it's been something that we've tried to get a proposed budget put together while not quite completing this program. So it was cost-wise, we did complete it probably at the beginning of this month, I believe. But when we had to put together the proposed budget, we weren't quite sure how much we needed to put towards this. And so at that point in time where we had to make final decisions about funding, this is coming from the general fund and the public safety fund both. The city manager and I, based on the best judgment I can make, and based on the fact that we were considering using existing vehicles and keeping them for an extra 4 years as part of this, as well as adding new vehicles, that would have increased depreciation costs. So what we did is throw both one-time and ongoing dollars at this at an amount that I could best judge as to how much to put towards it. So we put $1.3 million from the general fund and $570,000 from the public safety fund towards what I would call public safety fleet costs. Because what we were also experiencing at the same time is realizing that we didn't have enough money put away for the replacements that we were scheduled to make for 23, just due to inflation. What we've been putting aside over the last 4 years wasn't going to make the replacements we needed to make. We just replaced 2 fire trucks in the last year or more, and those also had come up short. And what that does is creates a problem in the fleet fund where it doesn't have enough dollars in its reserve account. So I was also targeting some of this money to go into the fleet fund, first to fill those gaps. So out of that $1,870,000, it left about $1.4 million or so for the program, for the take-home program, after putting the money towards those depreciation holes. Since we're doing it like we are, we're just buying new vehicles instead. We do not have the depreciation increase for next year, and so because what we do is we charge our O&M and depreciation in a 1 year in arrears. So there's not a lot of ongoing costs hitting next year. And so I had a lot of $300,000 of ongoing dollars in the general fund program toward this for 23. And I only need probably 16,000, almost 17,000 between the two funds for ongoing costs just for the radios and MDCs that are going along with it. Earlier in the budget process, you heard me say that I've got some one-time money in the general fund, but I'm short ongoing money in the general fund. So what I've done is a little bit of taken this and moved it over here and taken that and moved it over there. I'm going to give you a summary of that next week so that you know where that money went in the general fund. That left a little bit of hole in of the $1.4 million. And so about a 30,000 or so gap, 33,000, I think. And so what we do need to do is add $50,800 from the Public Safety Fund of one-time money to complete the funding for this program. That's not in the proposed budget currently, but we will also show you that next week when we show you the summary of any changes. And then again, like I'll show you, what I've done is take that ongoing money and used it to fill any of the expenses that we've identified since the beginning of this process, which we will identify for you again next week, and I'll show you where that money's going. So I took the ongoing money from this program, moved it towards other ongoing needs in the general fund that weren't funded, and then took the extra ongoing one-time money in the general fund and moved it towards the take-home program. Everything's balanced. So wanted to let you know that, and I will give you a better summary of that next week.
Are we going to be able to afford this in 2024?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for reminding me. So there is no guarantee, and I want to stress that to everyone here, including Dave and everyone who's put this together. This is a 3-year program pending funding availability, and there's no guarantee that we have that money in each of those next 2 budgets. But certainly we're going to strive to get that in there. But it's going to depend on what happens during this year's fiscal year results as well as the revenue into next year. So nothing's guaranteed, but that's our goal is to try to get this in place. I'm going to shift one more thing budget related, somewhat budget related. It's not 2023 proposed budget related, but as a bit of news that came up in the last week that I wanted to relay to you all that you may have already heard or may hear about, but I just found out about last week. So yeah, we had a call last week from someone who called our switchboard and said, I think they asked for me and they said they want to talk to us about the money that we're getting from the sale of the Broncos. And so I got that message, and I said, yeah, right, okay, thanks. So I said, I'm not going to worry about that. And then later that morning, we got a check for $980,000. So what this is coming from the Metropolitan Football Stadium District. And as part of the sale of the Broncos, I think when the tax was put into place, to fund that stadium, and we were part of the districts that had to pay into that tax, the sales tax. I think the lease that they had with the ownership of the Broncos was that if they ever sold it, they would have to pay back a certain amount of dollars. A percentage of the sale would go back towards all those entities that had been contributing to that tax back in the early 2000s and late 90s, I think. So we got $980,000, and I got a letter that told us that under that agreement, we would need to use that for youth activity programs, and that was the extent of the
youth sports activity.
I'm reading from the letter. Okay. Youth activity programs.
How many pickleball courts can we get out of that?
We're going to get some more youth out on those courts. But anyway, so we obviously just learned of this, and so staff will bring back to you later, probably not as part of this budget process, since you're going to need to act on that within a couple of weeks. But we will bring you some options for consideration. The district, when I talked to the manager at the district, and he said what they're going to do is check back in with all the entities in a year to see what did you do with the money. So I think at a minimum, we may not have to spend it by then, but we may want to have a plan in place for what we're going to do with it by then. But some surprisingly good news out of the blue. So there you go.
That is good news. Thank you.
You bet.
Go Broncos. Teresa, you have more for us.
And our final agenda item for budget-related stuff tonight is your public hearing. So just for the record, it is a charter requirement that we hold a public hearing on or before October 1st. And we typically do that. It typically covers not only the 2023 operating budget, but also our CIP. So we recommend one public hearing covering both topics.
So we had opted to have the public hearing after the presentation, so I'm opening up to the public. Anyone make comments on what we have seen and heard tonight on our budget, both CIP and operating? Most of our public left. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Do councilors have any comments or questions on what we've heard tonight? Okay, I think we're good. That is all for our budget. So our next presentation is the Zero Waste Resolution Alternatives. There are two alternatives here. Let me read them and then you can give the presentation. They are R 2022-146A or R 2022-146B. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Longmont, Colorado, updating the 2008 Zero Waste Resolution and pledging to implement strategies to increase waste diversion. So there are two of them that we have to decide upon. C is requesting direction from us regarding the disposal of two Longs Peak water nope. Oh, I'm sorry. I am getting these all under one presentation. I don't think you want that. So go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
So I don't have a presentation tonight, but I did want to answer any questions that you have. I'd like to start with a couple comments first, real quickly. We decided upon two alternatives rather than putting it on the consent agenda, but they're ready to go. So if you choose one and want to vote on it tonight, that is your prerogative, of course. And if you would prefer to give us direction to come back with yet another version, we're happy to do that also. These versions are identical with the exception of the metrics. So the waste diversion numbers on the target dates of 2030 and 2050 are different. Otherwise, they are identical. At your direction, we took these versions and made the language stronger with regards to the intent to divert waste in Longmont. So we did make that change, but that is identical in both versions. I also wanted to mention that using the metaphor I used back in June, these are a compass. Either of these versions function as a compass. They don't obligate the city really to do anything until we come back to you and start discussing budget requests that may lead to waste diversion programs or code changes that would do that. So these are indeed aspirational, but they do point us, they're your direction to us through the community, and they do point us into the actions and activities of developing the programs that would meet the intent of what's in either resolution or a different one if you would prefer us to come back with something else. So with those comments, I would answer any questions, and I have Lisa Knobloch, our sustainability manager, and Becky Doyle, our Director of Strategic Integration, I got that right, to help me answer any questions you may have.
Councilor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Real quick, and not for an answer tonight, and it wouldn't honestly be probably for, if there was a question at some point when a proposal came back to the council to make operational or implement some aspect of this. And I know we have or likely we'll see a universal composting ordinance come at some time, maybe by the end of the year. At that time, and when recommendations come back that are tied to this, the resolution we adopt, you'd be able to provide a fiscal note, I would assume. If you implement X, Y, or Z, here's what we would see as the cost to be and its implications for other things we're trying to get done in the city, right? If, you know, I know just what, like there was the line in here, page 6, at least in our version, line, I think 12 or 14, specifically in reference to permitting projects based on the kind of materials they're going to use, et cetera. And so, you know, the question is, gee, I wonder what what the implications might be for our housing objectives. And before an action would be taken, hopefully that question gets asked and answered. Not for tonight, but you could do that at some point, I assume.
Mayor and Council, yes, we would not only bring those back, but every alternative that we are going to explore is going to have a cost, just like doing nothing would have a cost. Yeah. So we hope to actually come back and discuss not just the financial and budget costs, but also what we think maybe would be some of the social costs to this as well.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So, yes.
So you're looking for direction from us to bring this zero waste. Can you, this is a little bit of ignorance, but I also want the public to hear, what's the difference between 146A and 146B?
So, let me see if I can pull that up real quick on my. I'm sorry, what's that? Yes. Yeah. Do you want to answer that real quick from your version? Thank you.
Just hit this button. Sorry. All right. Mayor Peck and members of council, Lisa Knobloch, Sustainability Program Manager. So the differences in the two, alternative 1 or version A, 14A, I believe, is a waste reduction goal of 70% by 2030 and 85% by 2050. And then alternative 2 is 75% by 2030 and 95% by 2050. And to just note one other small difference in those two also is the correlating avoided greenhouse gas emissions associated with the 85% and 95% goals.
Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. As noted, this is aspirational and a compass for the direction that we would like to see. And I think, in my opinion, aiming higher is probably the way to go when we've already declared a climate emergency. This council has. And so, to be consistent, I would prefer, and I move, Resolution 2022-146B.
Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. What's your vote? Share your vote. Yes. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Shoot for the stars.
And I did want to make one last comment about the schedule for coming back with a universal recycling ordinance. We do want to come back in December. We could even bring a draft, but we also feel that there's going to be a need to have some higher level conversation before we just start dumping a draft at you. So we're probably, in particular because this was delayed a little bit, we're probably a little bit behind there. the work has been ongoing, so that's not behind, but that discussion still needs to kind of begin at the first starting point. So you can expect that from us sometime at December. I don't know if we have a study session in December scheduled, but that would be my preference would be to put it on one or a light business, regular business meeting.
So since this is zero waste resolution, I would also at some point like to know where we are on the composting facility, our old wasteland out there. Are there still conversations about that when you bring back the other part of that discussion? I think it all goes together.
Yes, we will do that.
Thank you. So now we are at C, requesting direction from City Council regarding the disposal of 2 Longs Peak water taps that are on the Double Six Ranch open space, but not needed for the management of the open space property. Is there any discussion on this or presentation?
There's no presentation, but we can answer questions if
Okay.
council has it.
Councilor Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Just to get it started, I'll offer a motion
Okay.
that we direct staff to proceed with the process as outlined in the disposition of open space ordinance.
I'll second that. So it's been moved by Councilor Waters. I seconded it. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Did yours come up, Marcia? Okay. And that carries unanimously. Great. The second one the last one on our list here is the compensation review for employees appointed by council, city manager, city attorney, and the municipal judge. And I think we have motions by councilors. Let's go with city manager. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I have 3 motions to make, so if you'll just indulge me. So the first motion is this. I move that we direct staff to increase Harold Dominguez's salary to 101% of market. Additionally, that we direct staff to apply the exceptional pay of 1%, bringing Mr. Dominguez's salary to 102% of market. That's the first motion.
Do we have a second? Second. So it's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote.
Can I proceed with?
Yes, and that passes unanimously. Go ahead.
So the second motion is this, that Mr. Dominguez be given a one-time retention bonus of $20,000. We created a retention bonus program a year ago, and we would add to this $20,000 that if Mr. Dominguez chooses to accept that bonus before the end of 2024, he would repay it, but it would be a bonus to retain him through calendar year 2024.
Correct.
Second.
All right. That motion was made by Councilor Waters, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Let's vote. That passes unanimously.
A third motion, I move that we authorize Mayor Peck to sign the contracts for all 3 of these employees once the contracts are ready for signature.
Thank you. That's been made by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. That carries unanimously. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Before we move on to that, can I just say thank you very much, Harold, for everything that you're doing. And to the public that thinks that it's too much, just think of all the things that you're complaining about that we have to resolve in some way. And this is why we're paying you. So
Can I add my, can I build on that?
Yes.
Since I had the good fortune of making the motion. I want to say to Harold, what an asset you are to the city. And however, whatever shows up in the paper tomorrow, I've enjoyed the experience of having my salary above the fold, right, in the local newspaper. That's not fun. Your kids are out of the house now, so it's not so much of a burden for them. But I was asked yesterday by Matt, for a comment. And what I said to him was, you are worth every penny, as is Eugene and the judge, every penny and more than what you're going to get paid. It's impossible really to calculate the cost to this city if you weren't in that seat, either with someone else there or the cost of replacing you. The worst and last thing we'd want to have happen is for us to be looking for another city manager. So I hope we tighten these handcuffs with those retention bonuses snugly enough that you won't think about getting itchy feet. So thanks for your service.
Actually, I'm going to make one more comment. That's a good point you made, Councillor Waters. Everybody in our city, I think, is being asked by other municipalities to come work for them. And if we lose Harold, he'll make a bigger salary, probably leaving. We don't want him to leave. So if you think this is a lot of money, it's not nearly what it would be to replace him. So, and we wouldn't get the expertise, the historical value, the love of the city. So thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'd like to move to direct staff to increase City Attorney Eugene May's pay to 101% of market, and additionally direct staff to apply the exceptional pay of 1%, bringing Mr. May's total to 102% of market.
So that's been made by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councillor Yarbrough. Let's vote on the salary. And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one additional motion. Similarly, I would like to move that Mr. May be given a one-time retention bonus of $15,000 that he would be required to repay if he does leave prior to December 31st, 2024.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councillor Martin. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you, both of you, for your service and for all of the great advice you've been giving us, Eugene. All those executive sessions that we're loving. Thank you. And now I would like to make a motion to direct staff to increase Judge Robert Frick's pay to 101% of market. So I made that motion, and it was seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. Additionally, I'd like to move to direct staff to apply exceptional pay of 1%, bringing Judge Frick to 102% of market. So I made that motion, and it was seconded by Councillor Waters. Let's vote. Thank you. That carries unanimously. So it's our final call of public invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the public that would like to come speak on any subject? Seeing none, I'll close public invited to be heard. We are at Mayor and Council comments. Do we have any comments? Councillor Waters?
How did you know I was going to buzz in right there? Thank you.
I'm just used to it.
Just a question, first of all. Harold, this is not going to surprise you, but I do think that the question deserves a public response. A few meetings ago, we authorized $40,000 out of our contingency fund to cover the cost of making operational a communication plan via a contract with VIA, through a contract with VIA, for LHA residents. And we haven't heard anything about it since then, other than some feedback from advisory board members who are concerned. Could you just share publicly what the plan is to get that contract executed?
Yeah, so there was a bit of a question on purchasing or how we would approach it early on. We did identify the contract with VIA that we have through Community Services. Eliberto has sent me the contract with the language that he worked on along with Phil Greenwald. And so I think they're working with Tim Hull on that one. And so it looks like it's pretty close. I just had to make one change in terms of the term, because you all said $40,000 to finish the year and go to the end of 2023. And I just made that adjustment in this. and sent that to them, and so they'll work with them on getting it finalized, and then that's one that staff can sign, because staff signed the original contract, so.
Is this going to take days, weeks, months?
I think what I'm looking at, we're pretty close, so we should hopefully have it no later than mid next week, but I'm going to shoot for earlier than that.
I think the intent, when we talked about it, was have this ready to go in October. So I think that's important to expedite. And I know you've got other things.
And I know Lisa, just so you know, Lisa's conducted surveys with residents to determine where they want to go, what stores they want to go shop.
Yeah, good.
And so that work has also been done while this is being worked on. So surveys are back, and we know based on location where folks want to go. And this looks pretty clean to me, so I've got to get Eugene and Tim to do that.
Just a second then question for you. I know this is kind of a hot potato issue, but I think at least I'd like to know, is there a time and do we have a plan for giving us a chance to talk with one another and with you and with Eugene, our public safety staff, and anybody else in the community? We heard tonight from residents expressing their concerns about crime. It's hard to bite my tongue and say, do you understand some of the context in which our police officers are working that are a result of what our state legislature did in 2020 in the name of or in the interest of criminal justice reform? And we've had a lot of kind of sidebar conversations about how we weigh in, what we'd like our legislators to hear, the kinds of amendments that we think need to be made to legislation. And I'm certainly, there are a variety of ways to think about those. But is there a time when we're scheduled to have that conversation?
I'm trying to look at my schedule now.
Can I just jump in here?
Sure.
Because when you brought up the pickleball issue at the beginning of the meeting, I was thinking about the crime and how many other issues that we've been brought to us from the public that we don't have the opportunity to sit down and explain our position. So it isn't just the crime, but it's also pickleball with the courts and the dates for the parks. It is also transportation in congestion and what are we doing about it and our constraints. Any other subject that I think that the counselors have been emailed about, telephoned about, that we can actually have an in-depth explanation, not necessarily a conversation with everything, but an explanation of where we stand and why we are or are not moving quicker than they would like us to. I just feel like we're kind of ignoring some of their issues in education.
Well, certainly it would appear to the public as though we are.
Exactly.
When we're actually not. I mean, we've got our own constraints, or we've already done things that have been responsive but that don't show up. And I agree. Every one of those topics is important. I just don't want to lose. We're headed into a legislative session, and I don't want this to be conflated or conflicted with an election cycle coming up. So sometime after that, but I do think it's really important. This is for what it's worth. We have some concerns in my neighborhood that the HOA invited one of our police officers, and our police department is so responsive for anybody who would like the same experience. One of the officers who patrols our part of town, met with the residents who showed up for this neighborhood meeting, and just did a fabulous job. Melinda, whose last name I won't remember, police officer, so give her kudos. She did a fantastic job answering questions. But it was obvious as the meeting unfolded, the less, when she couldn't be specific or responsive to the specific concerns, not because she didn't want to, it's because of what's happened with the context. The law's changed and what the standards for probable cause are and all that kind of stuff, that you could tell them that the meeting turned a little tense. And I did finally say, look, I'm here as resident, but I'm also your city council member representative, and I'm happy to listen to any concerns, but understand she's part of the solution. She's not the problem. She's constrained because of the context within which she's working, which is true for all of our officers. So I think we owe it to the public to explain this in ways that people understand what we can and can't do these days.
And that morphs into our homeless as well.
It sure
The
does.
police, the legislation, the Supreme Court,
Everything.
all of it. And we need, I agree, we need to be able to talk to the public and let them know that we are working on these things, and we are hearing them.
Yeah, I think, so what I was looking for in this is I knew I had a meeting this week so we could set the parameters for that. It's actually an internal meeting I'm having with staff tomorrow at 2. That sets the parameters, and then we can come back to you all and talk to you
Great.
about that piece. I thought it was Friday. Eugene had to point it out on my calendar when it was. So we're going to start that so we can come back to you all and have the conversation. And what I would add, so that the community can really, it's equally frustrating for our officers. And that is.
I can tell you it was that night.
Well, and I've had the opportunity to spend time with them and be out in the field with them and just to see what they have to go through on certain situations and situations that are significant. And so we're going to work through that as staff, kind of get some specific examples of what we're talking about. But we'll be able to, I will put that in city manager comments for the next Tuesday's meeting based on the outcome on this one.
And we heard it tonight, and we certainly read it in newspapers, and we see it in the TC line, and somehow that Longmont's lost its way in terms of public safety, without any understanding of the fact that Longmont sits in a state that the state legislature passes laws with which our police officers and we have to comply. So,
just an example of what we'll talk about. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with command staff talking about a fairly significant issue, and we had a stop occur. And it took 30 minutes for them to figure out what charges they could bring based on the changes that occurred. And so that's one of them that we're going to look at and see, can we use that as an example? Because, that was significant for me to see that. What we talked about afterwards is that's daily for them.
Yeah.
And they're having to talk to their assistant chiefs.
Convene a committee meeting to decide what charge you can bring. That's nuts.
So tomorrow at 2.
Yeah, great. The last observation is, I'm sensitive to how late our meetings go, and I appreciate that. Personally, if that's an issue for the collective, I'd be happy to meet earlier, right? To wrap up earlier in the evening, if that would be helpful to anybody. And I know that's probably a problem for
Everyone
others. I know it's a squeeze. And it worked out fine tonight. I just want to put that on the table. If we want to change meeting times so we get the kind of robust discussions we need when they're needed, I'm willing to do whatever. I just think we owe it to the public to have the kind of robust discussion and be as knowledgeable and informed as they expect us to be before we start making decisions that cost them more money or, whatever they have to live with the consequences of whatever we do. So,
Thank you. Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, there were just a few things. Thanks for bringing all of this up. I wanted to talk about the crime, too, so you all already talked about it, and I appreciate already setting up a meeting so that we can be able to respond to our constituents. It's very important, and you can't blame them because, we have to be able to respond with some information. Speaking of voting, I got some emails about trying to get more people in Longmont to vote, and this was through the League of Women Voters, not to vote, but to participate in their ballot issues. So Longmont seemed to be the city that's not really signing up to learn more about the ballot issues, and maybe we know we're all that in a bag of chips and everybody know everything, but the League of Women Voters, Boulder County, is having a Zoom discussion of Longmont ballot issues on October the 9th. So please get on the League of Women Voters website and look up the ballot issues so you can be informed yourselves. That's very important. We always talk about we don't know how this passed or we don't know what this is, so it's important that we educate ourselves. And so the League of Women Voters are actually putting on that for you, and you can ask questions October the 9th, and it's a Zoom, so you don't have to meet in person. And I'm sorry, what'd you say, Tim?
I was just wondering out loud with Marcia, does that include our charter changes?
That's a good question. I don't.
Is there anybody from the city involved? Because there may be providing information without all the information you need is a problem, not a solution. I hope the league is well informed about the reasons why, because I've heard enough feedback that is just kind of out of left field.
Just on the ballot issues alone?
On our charter changes.
Okay. I'll find out. That's a good question. Thanks. See, that's why we have these discussions. One last thing. I'm kind of like Lance on this one. I did not know Colorado passed, I guess it's an ordinance or a law, that our human bodies can be composted. Really? I don't know how I feel about that. I'm just saying. So we're talking about composting, and so now you can. Why are you laughing, Joan? You can save your family, and their body decompose into soil, and you can use it to use the soil to replant. It's right here. I heard about this today, and I didn't know that 5 other states will be passing this law by 2027. So human beings will be compostable. Just in case, if you all didn't know that, it is true, and we were one of the first states to do it. Talking about zero waste, huh?
I've heard of that law as well, Shakita. If you can't get a bigger cart, just save your Amazon boxes. Oh, well, I'm glad we are ending on a note of hilarity. So I think that's it. City Manager, you have any comments?
Mayor, Council, I just wanted to thank you for what you did tonight. I really appreciate it. What I wanted to say is it is truly an honor to serve this community and serve every resident of our community. I know some of you have asked when we talk about housing authority and go, did you really want to do this? And what I can tell you is that this work, at the end of the day, is work that I enjoy doing. There's no better community to be in than Longmont with the way we communicate with each other and work with each other. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it. My family thanks you for keeping me on for one more year. But it's truly an honor, and it's something that I don't take for granted. You know, what we do is important, and we're here to serve the community every day that we come in. So thank you.
You're welcome. City Attorney Eugene.
Mayor and Council, I'd also like to express my appreciation for your support and faith in me to continue doing this job to the best of my abilities. Like Harold, it is an honor and a pleasure to come into work every day and try to improve the community in which I live. And people don't get that opportunity very often, and I am thankful for it, and I don't take it for granted. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, raise your hand. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.